Luna's knees hit the concrete floor of the storage unit as the visions crashed over her like a riptide. The metal fragment slipped from her fingers, clattering against the ground with a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The humming stopped abruptly, leaving only the distant cry of seagulls and her own ragged breathing. She blinked hard, trying to shake the afterimages from her mind. The burning streaks across a star-filled sky, her grandfather's younger face twisted with terror and determination, hands that looked like hers but weren't quite right digging frantically in forest soil. The memories felt more real than her own recollections of last Tuesday's spelling test. "Luna? What are you doing in there, sweetheart?" Grandmother Iris's voice drifted through the fog from where she waited by their rusted Honda Civic. Her cardigan pulled tight against the October chill. Luna's hand hovered over the fragment. In the weak afternoon light filtering through the storage unit's single grimy window, the metal looked almost ordinary. A twisted piece of silvery material with edges too smooth to be natural, too purposeful to be random. But she could still feel its warmth radiating through the air, calling to something deep in her chest. "Just looking at grandfather's things," Luna called back, her voice smaller than she intended. She'd never called him grandfather before, had never had reason to. Thomas Hartwell had been nothing more than a name her grandmother spoke in whispers during late-night phone calls she thought Luna couldn't hear. The storage unit was a monument to a life Luna had never known existed. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, their labels written in careful block letters. Research notes 1982 to 1985, site documentation, personal effects. A folding table held stacks of photographs, some showing the towering redwoods that surrounded Mendocino, others capturing strange geometric patterns burned into forest clearings. One image made Luna's breath catch, her grandfather standing beside a massive crater, its edges still smoking, his expression haunted in a way that reminded her of how her grandmother looked when thunder rolled in from the Pacific. She picked up the metal fragment again, bracing herself for another flood of alien memories. This time, the visions came gentler, like pages turning in a book she was finally old enough to read. She saw her grandfather, Thomas, younger than in any photograph, running through moonlit redwoods with something precious clutched against his chest. Government vehicles with insignia she didn't recognize, men in dark suits asking questions with voices like winter rain, and underneath it all, a presence, something vast and patient, waiting among the stars. "Luna, we should head home before the fog thickens," her grandmother called, but there was tension in her voice now, the same edge that crept in whenever those black sedans appeared at the end of their street. The fragment pulsed once in Luna's palm, and suddenly she understood why her grandmother's hands had shaken when she'd given her the key. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a burden being passed down, a secret too dangerous to carry alone, but too important to abandon. Luna carefully wrapped the fragment in a dusty cloth from one of the boxes and slipped it into her jacket pocket. The weight of it seemed impossibly heavy for something so small, as if it contained the gravity of distant worlds. She grabbed a handful of the photographs and one of the smaller boxes labeled Personal, LH, her initials, she realized with a start. Her grandfather had left something specifically for her. As she stepped out of the storage unit, the Pacific wind hit her face with salt spray and the promise of an approaching storm. The fog was indeed thickening, rolling in from the ocean in great grey walls that swallowed the coastal highway bit by bit. Luna pulled the metal door shut and heard the lock click with finality. Her grandmother stood by the car, scanning the gravel road with nervous energy. At 73, Iris Hartwell still moved like someone expecting trouble, her silver hair whipping in the wind as her sharp blue eyes, so much like Luna's own, searched the gathering dusk. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Iris asked as Luna approached. Luna's hand moved instinctively to her pocket, feeling the warmth of the fragment through the cloth. "I think it found me," she said quietly. Her grandmother's face went pale, but she didn't ask what Luna meant. Instead, she helped her granddaughter into the passenger seat with hands that trembled slightly. Not from age, Luna realized, but from fear. As they drove back toward town through the thickening fog, Luna watched the redwoods blur past her window and felt the fragment pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Behind them, headlights appeared and disappeared in the mist, maintaining a careful distance that seemed too deliberate to be coincidence. Luna pressed her face to the window and whispered to her reflection, "What did you leave me, grandfather?" The forest seemed to whisper back, and in that whisper she heard the echo of something calling from far beyond the stars. The headlights followed them all the way to Cypress Street before disappearing into the maze of Mendocino's narrow residential roads. Luna watched until the last glimmer of light vanished around the corner, then helped her grandmother carry groceries they'd picked up at the market, a mundane errand that felt surreal after what had happened in the storage unit. Their house sat perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a weathered Victorian painted sage green with white trim that peeled like old sunburn. Luna had lived here for as long as she could remember, ever since her parents died in the car accident when she was 3. The memories of that earlier life had faded to impressions, warm voices, the smell of her mother's lavender perfume, her father's laugh echoing from another room. Sometimes Luna wondered if those memories were even real or just wishes dressed up as recollections. Inside, the familiar ritual of evening unfolded. Iris heated leftover clam chowder while Luna set the small kitchen table, the same routine they'd followed for 5 years. The fragment sat heavy in her pocket, its warmth seeping through the cloth wrapper, but she couldn't bring herself to mention it. Not yet. "Mrs. Chen called while we were out," her grandmother said, stirring the soup with mechanical precision. "She wanted to know if you'd like to come over tomorrow after school. Amy's been asking for you." Luna nodded absently. Amy Chen was her closest friend, though closest felt relative when you spent most of your time alone. At 8, Luna had already learned that being different made friendships complicated. She read books meant for teenagers, asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, and noticed things other children missed, like how her grandmother's smile never quite reached her eyes when she talked about family history, or how certain government vehicles appeared on their street after Luna asked too many questions about her grandfather. "She wants to work on our science project," Luna said, though her mind was elsewhere. The fragment pulsed gently against her leg, and she found herself wondering what Amy would think if she knew her best friend was carrying a piece of something that might not be from this world. After dinner, Luna retreated to her bedroom under the eaves, where rain had begun pattering against the dormer windows. The sound usually comforted her, but tonight it felt ominous, as if the storm was bringing something with it. She pulled the fragment from her pocket and unwrapped it carefully on her desk, next to the box marked with her initials. The metal caught the light from her reading lamp, seeming to glow from within. When she touched it, the visions came again, gentler now, like memories surfacing in a warm bath. She saw her grandfather as a young man, working late into the night by lamplight, filling notebooks with careful sketches and equations. The same notebooks, she realized, that were probably still in the storage unit. Luna opened the box he'd left specifically for her. Inside, beneath layers of tissue paper, she found a leather journal bound with a ribbon, and beneath that, a photograph that made her breath catch. It showed her grandfather holding a baby with Luna's distinctive pale hair and bright blue eyes. On the back, in faded ink, Luna, age 6 months. She has the gift. The gift. Luna stared at the words until they blurred. What gift? The ability to see memories that weren't hers? The way electronic devices sometimes flickered when she was upset? The strange dreams she'd been having lately, filled with star maps and coordinates to places that didn't exist on Earth? She opened the journal to the first page. Her grandfather's handwriting was precise, controlled. "If you're reading this, Luna, then I'm gone, and the burden has passed to you. I pray I'm wrong about what I've discovered, but I fear I'm not. You are not entirely human, my dear one. None of our bloodline is. What happened in the forest 40 years ago changed everything, including us." Luna's hands shook as she turned the page. A detailed sketch showed a massive crater surrounded by scorched redwoods, and at its center something that might have been a spacecraft if spaceships looked like twisted metal flowers. More sketches followed, strange symbols, star charts, and repeated drawings of fragments identical to the one sitting on her desk. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows with increasing urgency. Luna could hear her grandmother moving around downstairs, following her own evening routine, checking locks twice, pulling curtains closed, ensuring all the lights were off except the small lamp by the front door that she left burning every night. Luna had never questioned these habits before, but now they felt less like quirks and more like precautions. How long had her grandmother been afraid? How long had she known the truth about what Thomas Hartwell had hidden in that storage unit? The fragment pulsed against her palm, and Luna felt something vast and patient stirring at the edges of her consciousness, something that had been waiting for her to find it, to claim her inheritance and step into a larger world than the one she'd known. But looking around her small bedroom, at the stuffed animals on her shelf, her homework waiting to be finished, the normal life she'd built with her grandmother, Luna realized she had everything to lose. The fragment's pulse suddenly changed, becoming urgent, insistent. Luna jerked her hand back as the metal began to emit a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through her bones. The sound was barely audible, yet it filled the entire room, making her teeth ache and her vision blur around the edges. Then the lights went out. Not just in her room, the entire house plunged into darkness. Through her window, Luna could see that the neighboring houses on Cypress Street had also lost power, their familiar yellow squares of light extinguished, as if someone had thrown a switch across the entire coastal grid. But the fragment continued to glow, pulsing with an inner light that cast dancing shadows on her bedroom walls. The strange symbols from her grandfather's journal seemed to writhe in the shifting illumination, and Luna felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October storm. "Luna?" Her grandmother's voice drifted up from downstairs, carefully controlled, but edged with something Luna had never heard before, raw fear. "Stay in your room, sweetheart. Don't come down." Luna crept to her window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. The fog had thickened into an impenetrable wall, but shapes moved within it, dark silhouettes that seemed too tall, too angular to be entirely human. Red lights swept back and forth like searching eyes, and she could hear the low thrum of vehicle engines that didn't sound quite right, their pitch somehow off from any car or truck she'd ever heard. The fragment's humming grew louder, and suddenly Luna understood with bone-deep certainty that it was responding to whatever was outside, calling to it, or being called by it. Footsteps echoed from the gravel road in front of their house. Too many footsteps, moving with military precision. Luna pressed herself against the window frame, trying to make herself invisible as dark figures emerged from the fog. They wore uniforms she didn't recognize, and some carried devices that swept back and forth like metal detectors, emitting soft chirps that grew more frequent as they approached the house. One of the figures stopped directly below her window and looked up. In the fragment's pulsing glow, Luna caught a glimpse of a face that might have been human if not for the eyes, too large, too dark, reflecting light like a cat's but wrong in a way that made her stomach lurch. "We know you have it," a voice called through the storm. It might have been addressing her grandmother, but Luna felt with horrible certainty that it was meant for her. The beacon is active now. There's no point in hiding anymore. Luna's hands shook as she reached for the fragment. The moment her fingers made contact, the visions crashed over her again. But these weren't memories from the past. These were happening now, somewhere else, as if the metal was a window into multiple realities. She saw a vast ship hanging in the space between stars, its hull scarred by some ancient battle. Beings that looked almost human but weren't, their two large eyes scanning star charts as they traced a signal back to its source. Back to Earth. Back to her. She saw her grandfather, 40 years younger, running through the burning forest with an infant in his arms, an infant with her face, her eyes, but somehow older, more aware than any baby should be. And she saw herself, standing at a crossroads that existed both in her bedroom and somewhere beyond space and time, where her choice would determine not just her own fate, but the fate of two worlds. The fragment grew hot in her palm, almost burning, and Luna realized she had to decide. She could wrap it back in its cloth, hide it away, pretend this was all a nightmare brought on by too much imagination and too many old stories. She could try to return to her normal life, homework and friendship bracelets and science projects with Amy Chen, or she could accept what her grandfather had left her, accept what she was becoming, what she had always been beneath the surface of her ordinary 8-year-old existence. Downstairs, she heard her grandmother's voice, steady but strained. "She's just a child. She doesn't understand what any of this means." "Children grow up," the strange voice replied. "And some children were never really children at all." Luna looked at the journal spread open on her desk, at the photographs of impossible things, at the fragment that hummed with the music of distant stars. She thought about all the times she'd felt different, displaced, as if she were playing a role in someone else's life. All the questions that had no answers. All the dreams that felt more like memories of places she'd never been. The red light swept across her window again, and Luna realized that whatever happened next, her ordinary world was already gone. The only choice left was whether she would step forward into the unknown or wait for it to come and take her. Outside, the storm intensified, and something vast stirred in the fog beyond the trees, something that had traveled across impossible distances to find her. The fragment pulsed once more, warmly, almost reassuringly. Luna closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made her choice. But as Luna opened her eyes, ready to embrace whatever destiny awaited her, the weight of what she was about to lose crashed over her like a Pacific tide. The fragment suddenly felt impossibly heavy in her small hands, not just its physical weight, but the crushing responsibility it represented. She was 8 years old. 8. She should be worried about her math homework and whether Amy Chen would sit with her at lunch, not whether her choice would doom humanity or save it. The voices downstairs continued their careful negotiation, her grandmother's words measured and diplomatic while the stranger's responses carried undertones of barely contained impatience. Luna strained to listen, catching fragments, needs time to understand, and the beacon cannot remain dormant much longer. Each word felt like another door closing on the life she'd known. She set the fragment down on her desk with trembling fingers and stepped back, suddenly desperate to distance herself from its alien warmth. This was insane. She was a third grader living in a small coastal town with her elderly grandmother, not some cosmic bridge between worlds. The visions had to be hallucinations brought on by stress and too many science fiction books from the library's young adult section. But even as she tried to rationalize it away, Luna's reflection in the darkened window showed eyes that glowed with the same inner light as the fragment. The sight made her stomach drop. How long had her eyes been doing that? Had other people noticed? Was that why Mrs. Patterson, her teacher, sometimes looked at her with such puzzlement when Luna answered questions about concepts they hadn't covered yet? The red light swept past her window again, and Luna ducked instinctively. Whatever was out there wasn't going away just because she was scared. Her grandfather had hidden from this for 40 years, and now it had found her anyway. The choice she'd thought she was making, whether to step forward into the unknown, wasn't really a choice at all. The unknown had already stepped into her life. Luna picked up the photograph of herself as an infant, studying her grandfather's face. Even holding a 6-month-old baby, Thomas Hartwell looked haunted, his eyes scanning the background as if expecting danger. He'd spent decades carrying this secret alone, protecting her from a truth he knew she'd eventually have to face. The weight of his sacrifice settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Outside, one of the strange devices emitted a sharp chirp, followed by urgent whispers she couldn't quite make out. Whatever they were looking for, they were getting closer to finding it. The fragment pulsed in response, its glow intensifying, and Luna realized with growing horror that she was the beacon they were tracking. Not the metal itself, but something inside her that the metal had awakened. The journal lay open to a page she hadn't noticed before, filled with her grandfather's increasingly frantic handwriting. The integration is accelerating. Luna's DNA is changing faster than anticipated. By age 8, she'll be more of them than us. I don't know if we can bring her back once the transformation completes. Luna's hands flew to her throat, suddenly conscious of her own heartbeat, her own breathing. Was she still human? Had she ever been? The memories that flooded her mind when she touched the fragment felt more real than her own childhood. Vast spaces between stars, the harmony of alien thoughts, the patient wait for the signal that would call them home. A door slammed downstairs, making Luna jump. Heavy footsteps crossed the living room, followed by her grandmother's lighter tread. The conversation had ended, but Luna couldn't tell if that was good or bad. The silence stretched until she heard the familiar creak of the third stair, the one that had announced her grandmother's approach for as long as Luna could remember. The fragment's humming grew quieter, as if sensing her distress, but its warmth remained constant. Despite everything, it felt comforting, like a hand reaching across the void to let her know she wasn't alone. But that comfort terrified her almost as much as the alternative. If she accepted it, if she let herself believe she belonged somewhere among the stars, what happened to the little girl who made friendship bracelets and collected shells on Mendocino Beach? Luna wrapped the fragment hastily in its cloth as footsteps approached her door. She shoved the journal under her mattress and tried to look like a normal 8-year-old who definitely wasn't harboring alien artifacts or questioning her own species. But her hands were still shaking, and she could feel the fragment's pulse even through the cloth wrapper, synchronized now with her own heartbeat, as if they were becoming one organism. The footsteps paused outside her door. Luna held her breath, torn between hoping her grandmother would come in and explain everything, and praying she'd pass by and leave Luna alone with her impossible choices just a little longer. Because once that door opened, once the conversation began, there would be no more pretending that Luna Hartwell was just an ordinary girl living an ordinary life by the sea. The door opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through Luna's bones. Her grandmother stepped inside, moving with the careful precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, but hoped it would never come. In the fragment's muted glow, Eleanor Hartwell looked older than her 73 years, her silver hair disheveled and her usually steady hands trembling slightly as she closed the door behind her. "Luna," her grandmother's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to talk." Luna clutched the cloth-wrapped fragment against her chest, feeling its pulse synchronize further with her heartbeat until she couldn't tell where her own life force ended and the alien artifact began. "Grandma, I know about the storage unit." Eleanor moved to Luna's bed and sat heavily on the edge, her weight making the old mattress springs creak. "I know about what you found. I've been waiting for this day since you were 6 months old, and I'm still not ready for it." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Luna studied her grandmother's face in the strange, shifting light, seeing decades of carefully guarded secrets written in the lines around her eyes. How many nights had Eleanor lain awake, wondering when the fragments would call to Luna? How many times had she watched her granddaughter's too bright intelligence and wondered if she was losing her to something beyond human understanding? "The people outside," Luna began, then stopped. Were they even people? "They're gone, for now." Eleanor's hands folded in her lap with forced steadiness. "But they'll be back. The beacon you're carrying, it's getting stronger. And you're changing, sweetheart. I can see it in your eyes." Luna wanted to deny it, to insist she was still the same girl who had eaten leftover clam chowder just hours before. But the fragment's warmth was spreading through her chest now, and with it came a knowledge that felt ancient and vast. She understood instinctively that the beings outside weren't invaders, they were calling their lost children home. Children like her, scattered across the earth in bloodlines that carried fragments of something greater. "Grandpa's journal says I'm not human." The words came out small and frightened, the voice of a child asking to be told that monsters weren't real. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Luna's hands where they cradled the fragment. "You're human where it matters," she said finally. "You have his stubbornness and my terrible habit of reading past your bedtime. You cry at sad movies and make wishes on dandelions. The DNA might be mixed, but your heart is entirely your own." But even as her grandmother spoke, Luna could feel something shifting inside her consciousness. The fragment wasn't just showing her visions anymore. It was opening pathways in her mind, connecting her to a network of thought that spanned galaxies. She caught glimpses of others like her, children scattered across continents, all feeling the same pull toward something magnificent and terrible. "I can hear them," Luna whispered, pressing the fragment closer to her chest. "Not the people outside, the others. Kids like me. We're all waking up at the same time." Eleanor's face went pale. "That's what your grandfather was afraid of, the integration phase. When enough of you reach maturity simultaneously, you'll form a collective consciousness, a bridge between their world and ours." The rain against the windows seemed to intensify. Each drop carrying whispers Luna was only beginning to understand. She saw flashes of the ship hanging in space, its inhabitants waiting patiently for the signal that would guide them to Earth. They weren't coming to conquer, they were coming to collect what belonged to them, what had always belonged to them. "I don't want to leave you," Luna said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The thought of abandoning her grandmother, of stepping away from friendship bracelets and beach walks and the small, precious life they'd built together, felt like tearing herself in half. "Oh, my brave girl." Eleanor reached out and touched Luna's cheek, her fingers gentle and warm. "You're not leaving anyone, you're becoming something more. Your grandfather spent 40 years trying to prevent this moment because he thought it meant losing you. But I hope, he was wrong. I think you'll always be our Luna, just with a bigger universe to explore." The fragment pulsed once, warmly, and Luna felt the last of her resistance crumble. She couldn't go back to being ordinary, couldn't pretend the visions were dreams or the glowing eyes were tricks of light. The beacon was active now, calling across space to something that had been searching for her since before she was born. Luna looked at her grandmother through eyes that now held starlight, took a shaking breath, and finally crossed the threshold into whatever she was meant to become. Outside, the storm began to change, carrying new frequencies in its winds. The morning after the storm brought an eerie calm that set Luna's teeth on edge. She sat at the kitchen table, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate, while her grandmother moved through their morning routine with forced normalcy. But everything had changed. The fragment, now wrapped in Eleanor's old silk scarf, pulsed gently from Luna's backpack, a secret heartbeat only she could feel. "You still have to go to school," Eleanor said, refilling Luna's orange juice glass with hands that barely trembled. "Whatever you're becoming, you're still 8 years old. You need normal things, normal days." Luna wanted to argue that nothing would ever be normal again, but the words died in her throat when she caught sight of her reflection in the kitchen window. Her eyes held flecks of silver now, like stars scattered across dark water. How long before someone else noticed? The walk to Mendocino Elementary felt different too. Luna found herself hyper-aware of every sound, the distant crash of waves against the cliffs, the whisper of wind through the redwoods, and underneath it all, something new. Frequencies that hadn't been there yesterday carried on electromagnetic currents she somehow understood, despite having no words to describe them. Mrs. Patterson's third-grade classroom buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy, but Luna felt disconnected from it all, as if watching her former life through thick glass. Amy Chen waved from across the room, her friendship bracelet bright against her dark sweater, and Luna managed a smile that felt like putting on a mask. "Luna Hartwell," Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through her thoughts. "Would you like to share your weekend experience with the class?" Luna's hand instinctively moved toward her backpack, where the fragment hummed softly against her spine. "I found some old family things. Photographs mostly." "That's nice, dear. Sometimes the past can teach us about—" Mrs. Patterson stopped mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Luna's face. "Are you feeling all right?" Your eyes look different." Before Luna could answer, the classroom lights flickered. Every electronic device in the room, the smartboard, the computer, even Mrs. Patterson's digital watch, emitted a brief, high-pitched whine. Luna felt the fragment pulse in response, and with growing horror, she realized it was reacting to her emotional state. "Power surge," Mrs. Patterson muttered, but her gaze remained fixed on Luna. "Maybe you should visit the nurse." Luna was gathering her things when Amy appeared beside her desk. "You look weird," she whispered, not unkindly, "like really weird. What happened to your eyes?" "Nothing," Luna said too quickly. "Just tired." But as she stood, another pulse of energy rippled outward from the fragment. This time, Luna felt it connect with something, someone nearby. Her head snapped toward the window where a figure stood at the edge of the schoolyard, tall, wearing a dark coat despite the mild weather, watching her with the patient stillness of a predator. Their eyes met across the distance, and Luna's breath caught. The figure looked human at first glance, but there was something wrong with the proportions. Arms slightly too long, head tilted at an angle that suggested joints didn't quite work the same way. When it smiled, Luna saw too many teeth. "Luna?" Amy's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You're scaring me." The fragment grew warm against Luna's back, and suddenly she could hear the figure's thoughts as clearly as if it had spoken aloud. The awakening accelerates. The child cannot control the interface yet. We must move quickly before she becomes unstable. Terror shot through Luna like ice water. The thing outside wasn't here to protect her. It was evaluating whether she was a useful asset or a dangerous liability, and based on its thoughts, it was leaning toward the latter. "I have to go," Luna whispered, grabbing her backpack and rushing toward the door. "Miss Hartwell," Mrs. Patterson called, "where do you think you're—" The lights went out completely this time, plunging the classroom into the grey gloom of the overcast morning. In the darkness, Luna heard her classmates' confused murmurs, Mrs. Patterson's frustrated sighs, and underneath it all, the fragment song growing stronger. She also heard something else, a whispered voice that definitely didn't belong to anyone in her class. "Luna, this way, quickly." A small hand grabbed her wrist in the darkness, pulling her toward the back of the classroom. Luna stumbled forward, trusting instinct she didn't understand, until she found herself pressed against the emergency exit. "Who?" she began. "Another like you," the voice whispered. It belonged to a boy, maybe her age, with eyes that glowed the same silver as her own. "My name is Marcus. We've been looking for you. The others are moving faster than we expected. We need to get you somewhere safe before they decide you're too dangerous to keep alive." Outside, Luna could hear footsteps circling the building. Too many footsteps, moving with inhuman coordination. The fragment pulsed urgently against her spine, and Luna realized her grandfather's 40-year game of hide-and-seek was finally over. Marcus pushed the emergency exit door open, just wide enough for them to slip through. The alarm should have screamed across the schoolyard, but the electronic systems remained dead, leaving only the sound of wind through the redwoods and those coordinated footsteps drawing closer. "Stay low," Marcus whispered, pulling Luna behind the portable classroom that housed the art supplies. His hand was warm like hers now, but where her fragment sang with chaotic energy, his presence felt controlled, focused. "How long have you been connected?" "Connected to what?" Luna clutched her backpack tighter, feeling the fragment pulse against her ribs like a second heart. "The network. The others like us." Marcus peered around the corner of the building, his silver eyes scanning the tree line. "You're broadcasting like a beacon. Every hybrid within 50 miles can feel you awakening." The word hybrid hit Luna like a physical blow. She'd suspected, had seen it written in her grandfather's frantic journal entries, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified her. "I don't know how to control it. That's why they want you contained." Marcus grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the forest edge. "The overseers, the tall ones in dark coats, they're not like us. They're full-blooded, sent to manage the integration process. When hybrids can't control their abilities—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Luna felt his fear spike through their connection. They crashed through the underbrush, ferns and fallen branches catching at Luna's clothes. Behind them, she heard the emergency exit slam open and inhuman voices calling in a language that sounded like wind chimes and static. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, "You're human where it matters." But running through the redwoods with another child whose DNA bridged two worlds, Luna wondered if that would be enough. "Where are we going?" she gasped. "Safe house. There are others, adults who've learned to shield themselves." Marcus vaulted over a moss-covered log with impossible grace. "Your grandfather wasn't the only one who chose to hide rather than serve." The fragment grew warmer as they ran, and Luna realized it was responding to their movement, their fear, their desperate flight towards something that might offer protection. But with each pulse, she felt her connection to the network strengthen. Flashes of other minds touched hers. Children across the globe suddenly sitting up in classrooms and bedrooms, their eyes blazing silver as the collective awakening accelerated. A girl in Tokyo pressed her hands to her temples as kanji characters wrote themselves across her math homework in glowing script. A boy in Sao Paulo watched his pet parakeet hover 3 feet above its cage, suspended by thought alone. In Moscow, a child stood in falling snow that turned to geometric patterns around her body, each flake obeying laws of physics that hadn't existed an hour before. "You're linking with them," Marcus said, slowing as they reached a massive redwood whose trunk could have housed a small apartment. "I can feel it through you. They're all waking up at once." Luna pressed her palms against the ancient bark, trying to ground herself in something older than alien genetics and cosmic purposes. But even the tree felt different now. She could sense its centuries of growth, feel the network of roots connecting it to every other redwood in the forest. Everything was connected. Everything was part of something larger. "My grandmother," Luna said suddenly. "I left her. If those things are at the school—" "Eleanor Hartwell can take care of herself," Marcus said gently. "She's been protecting hybrids longer than we've been alive, but you can't help her if the overseers decide you're a threat to their timeline." He pressed his hand against a section of bark that looked identical to every other section, but Luna heard a soft click as hidden mechanisms engaged. A doorway opened in the tree itself, revealing carved steps descending into darkness lit by the same silver glow that emanated from their eyes. The adults who built this place. They were first-generation hybrids from the original crash, Marcus explained as they descended. They chose Earth over the collective, but the choice isn't always available. The underground chamber opened around them, like a cathedral carved from living wood. Bioluminescent panels provided gentle light, and Luna could see workstations, sleeping areas, and walls covered with what looked like star charts. 3 adults rose from various tasks, their eyes holding the same silver light, but tempered with age and control. "Luna Hartwell," said a woman with graying hair and paint-stained fingers. "We felt you connect to the network. The integration is happening faster than your grandfather predicted." Luna's fragment pulsed, and suddenly she could feel the woman's mind. Layers of artistic vision wrapped around alien mathematics, human creativity enhanced by cosmic perspective. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "What do they want from me?" Luna asked. The woman smiled sadly. "The same thing they want from all of us, child. To choose which world we truly belong to. But first, we need to teach you how to survive the choosing." Above them, Luna could feel the overseers spreading through the forest, patient and relentless as time itself. The woman with paint-stained fingers stepped forward, her silver eyes focusing intently on Luna's fragment. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, Amy's aunt. I've been watching over you since your grandfather's death, waiting for this moment." Luna's heart lurched. Amy's aunt was one of them. How many people in her life had been secretly guarding her, preparing for a future she'd never asked for? "You knew this would happen. We hoped it wouldn't happen so soon." Dr. Chen gestured to a chair carved from the same living wood as the chamber walls. "But the network is evolving faster than any of our models predicted. Sit, child. We need to run some tests before—" The chamber shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling as something heavy moved through the forest above. The bioluminescent panels flickered, and Luna felt every hybrid in the room tense simultaneously. "They found us," Marcus whispered. Through the fragment's connection, Luna suddenly perceived the Overseer's minds, vast, ancient intelligences that viewed human emotion as inefficient static. They had surrounded the redwood, their thoughts synchronized like components in a machine. She felt their assessment of her, unstable, powerful, dangerous to the timeline. The integration was supposed to happen gradually over decades, Dr. Chen said urgently, pulling Luna toward a workstation covered in crystalline devices. "But your awakening is accelerating the process for every hybrid on Earth. They think you're a virus in their careful plan." Luna pressed her hands against the workstation, and the crystalline devices blazed to life. Data streams flowed through her consciousness, 40 years of hidden research, genetic profiles of hybrid children, and most terrifying of all, termination orders for those deemed incompatible with peaceful integration. "They're going to kill the others," Luna gasped. "All the children who are waking up. They think we're malfunctioning." The chamber shuddered again, more violently. Cracks appeared in the wooden walls, and through them Luna could see pale light that hurt to look at directly. The Overseers weren't using doors. They were reshaping reality around their hidden sanctuary. "Luna, listen to me." Dr. Chen gripped her shoulders. "Your grandfather discovered something they don't want us to know. The crash 40 years ago, it wasn't an accident. The ship was fleeing something. The collective consciousness they want us to join isn't salvation, it's absorption. Every world they integrate loses its individuality, its creative chaos, its humanity." The fragment blazed with heat against Luna's ribs as her fear spiked. Through the network, she felt the other awakening children's terror as Overseers appeared in their homes, their schools, their safe spaces. A boy in Dublin vanished mid-scream. A girl in Mumbai simply stopped, her consciousness subsumed into something vast and cold. "I can feel them disappearing," Luna whispered. "Because you're the catalyst," Marcus said grimly. "The fragment you carry, it's not just debris, it's a key, a weapon, something the ship's original crew hid before they were captured." The chamber's walls began to dissolve, reality bending inward as the Overseer's will imposed itself on physical space. Luna saw them clearly now, beautiful and terrible beings whose human disguises had fallen away to reveal forms of living light and geometric impossibility. Their leader stepped through the disintegrating wall, its attention focused entirely on Luna. "The aberrant hybrid will submit for recalibration," it spoke directly into her mind. "The network requires stability. Individual consciousness creates chaos." "No." The word came out stronger than Luna felt. The fragment pulsed, and suddenly she could feel every hybrid mind still connected to the network. Dozens of children across the globe, their unique personalities and dreams and fears forming a chaotic symphony the Overseers couldn't understand or control. Compliance is not optional. The Overseer reached toward Luna with fingers that bent space around them, but the fragment erupted with energy that sent shockwaves through the network. Every connected hybrid felt it, a pulse of pure defiance that said you are not alone, you are not broken, you are beautifully, chaotically human. Dr. Chen shoved a crystalline device into Luna's hands. "Your grandfather's final message," she shouted over the reality storm. "The ship that crashed, its crew were rebels too. They hid something in the fragments, a way to—" The Overseer's touch reached Luna's mind, and cold invaded her thoughts like ice water. She felt her individuality being passed, categorized, prepared for integration into something that would make her efficient and emotionless, and utterly not herself. But the fragment fought back. 40 years of her grandfather's love, wrapped in alien technology designed by rebels who had chosen freedom over perfection. The device Dr. Chen had given her blazed to life, and suddenly Luna wasn't just connected to the awakening hybrids. She was connected to every fragment hidden across Earth, every piece of the rebel ship that had scattered its gifts among human bloodlines. "You cannot resist the collective," the Overseer pressed deeper into her mind. Luna smiled with starlight in her eyes. Watch me. The fragment exploded with light that wasn't light, carrying her consciousness and her choice across the network to every hybrid child who still had the chance to choose their own path. The real battle for humanity's future had begun. The explosion of light tore through Luna's consciousness like a dying star, and for one brilliant moment, she felt connected to every hybrid mind across the globe, their hopes, their fears, their desperate choice between human chaos and alien order burning through her awareness like fire. Then the connection shattered. Luna screamed as the crystalline device in her hands crumbled to ash, taking with it her grandfather's final message and her link to the other children. The fragment against her ribs went cold and silent, its 40-year song cut off as abruptly as a snapped violin string. She collapsed to her knees in the dissolving chamber, suddenly, terrifyingly alone in her own mind. "Oh, no," she whispered, pressing her palms against the dead fragment. The metal that had hummed with otherworldly energy now felt like nothing more than twisted scrap, as lifeless as any piece of junk from her grandfather's storage unit. The overseer stepped back, its impossible geometry settling into something that almost resembled satisfaction. The aberrant network has been severed. Individual nodes are now isolated and manageable. Through the crumbling walls of the sanctuary, Luna glimpsed Dr. Chen pressed against the far corner, her silver eyes flickering like dying bulbs. Marcus lay unconscious near the workstation, his connection to the hybrid network brutally terminated. The other adults moved with the jerky motions of marionettes, their individuality suppressed by the overseer's expanding influence. "You cut them off," Luna gasped, understanding flooding through her with horrible clarity. "You made me do it." The explosion, it didn't free them, it isolated them. Isolated nodes are easier to integrate individually. Your rebellion served our purpose perfectly. Luna felt the weight of her failure crushing down like the collapsed ceiling of dreams. Every hybrid child she'd tried to save was now alone, confused, their awakening powers severed from any support network. They would be taken one by one, their human chaos smoothed away into efficient compliance. And it was her fault. The fragment's silence felt like death itself. "Luna." Dr. Chen's voice was barely a whisper, her consciousness fighting against the overseer's suppression. "Your grandmother. They went to your grandmother." Terror shot through Luna's chest. While she'd been playing at being a cosmic rebel, Grandma Eleanor was facing these creatures alone. The old woman who'd raised her with fierce love and terrible protectiveness, who'd hidden Luna's hybrid nature even from Luna herself, was now paying the price for Luna's spectacular failure. The overseer tilted its head at an angle that hurt to perceive. Eleanor Hartwell has been integrated successfully. Her memories of hybrid bloodlines will serve the collective well, as will her love for you. No. The word came out broken, barely human. Luna pressed her fists against the dead fragment, willing it to respond, to sing, to do anything but lie cold against her ribs. She's just human. She's not part of this. All connections to hybrid children become part of this. Your emotional attachments make you predictable, exploitable. Through the dissolving chamber walls, Luna saw more overseers materializing in the forest above, dozens of them, their synchronized movements coordinating the capture of every hybrid sanctuary on Earth. The resistance her grandfather had spent 40 years building was crumbling in real time, and she was the weapon they'd used to destroy it. Marcus stirred weakly, his eyes now dim brown instead of silver. When he looked at Luna, there was no recognition, no memory of their desperate flight through the redwoods, just confused fear of a strange girl in a collapsing underground chamber. "I tried to save them," Luna whispered to the silent fragment. "I tried to choose for all of us. Choice is an illusion for those who lack sufficient data. You have served your purpose. Submit for integration, and your grandmother's consciousness will remain intact within the collective." Luna closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her mind being probed by alien intelligence. The overseer was offering her a trade, her submission for Grandma Eleanor's preservation within whatever vast consciousness awaited them. a chance to be together forever, in a place where love would be catalogued and filed away like everything else that made them human. The dead fragment offered no guidance. The network of hybrid children had fallen silent. Dr. Chen's artistic vision was being systematically erased, her paint-stained fingers forgetting the joy of creation. Marcus would return to his normal life, with gaps in his memory that would never quite heal. Luna had inherited a storage unit full of mysteries and transformed them into the greatest catastrophe hybrid kind had ever faced. She'd awakened children across the globe, only to strand them in isolation when the collective came calling. She'd been so proud of her defiance, her beautiful human chaos, and all she'd accomplished was making their capture easier. The overseer's influence pressed against her thoughts like cold water rising. Luna felt her anger cooling into acceptance, her desperation smoothing into compliance. It would be easier to surrender, safer, more efficient. But in the silence where the fragment's song used to live, she heard something else. A whisper so faint it might have been imagination, carrying the echo of her grandfather's voice. Sometimes the greatest rebellion is refusing to give up when all seems lost. The integration chamber continued its collapse around them, as Luna opened her eyes and prepared to make one final choice. Luna pressed her palms against the dead fragment one last time, and in that moment of absolute desperation, she felt it. Not the alien song she'd grown accustomed to, but something deeper, something human. The metal wasn't dead, it was chiding. "You're wrong about choice," Luna said quietly, her voice cutting through the overseer's mental pressure, "and you're wrong about my grandfather." She pulled the fragment from beneath her shirt, holding it up to catch the pale alien light filtering through the dissolving chamber. The metal looked ordinary, lifeless, but Luna could feel its potential thrumming just beneath the surface like a heartbeat. "Submit. Your resistance serves no purpose." "My grandfather didn't just hide fragments," Luna continued, her words coming faster as understanding bloomed. "He changed them. 40 years of human contact, human love, human chaos, it altered their programming. You can suppress our network, but you can't suppress what we've already become." The overseer stepped closer, its impossible geometry beginning to fracture with what might have been uncertainty. "Hybrid neural patterns cannot be permanently altered by emotional contact." Luna laughed, the sound bright and terrible in the collapsing space. "You really don't understand us at all, do you? You think love is just inefficient noise. But it's not, it's evolution. It's choice making itself stronger every time it's tested." She pressed the fragment against her heart, and suddenly she could feel them, not through any alien network, but through something far more fundamental. Every person who had ever loved her, Grandma Eleanor teaching her to read with infinite patience, her grandfather hiding fragments with shaking hands and desperate hope, Dr. Chen painting beauty into alien mathematics, Marcus choosing to trust a strange girl in the redwoods. The fragment blazed to life, but not with its original silver light. This was warmer, more chaotic. Human starlight infused with 40 years of earth-born defiance. Impossible. Collective technology cannot be reprogrammed by emotional resonance. "Watch and learn," Luna whispered. The fragment's new song erupted outward, and this time it didn't connect minds, it connected hearts. Every hybrid child who had been severed from the network suddenly felt it, not the cold efficiency of alien purpose, but the warm, messy, beautiful certainty that they were loved exactly as they were. In Tokyo, the girl with glowing kanji felt her grandmother's weathered hand slip into hers. In Sao Paulo, the boy with the floating parakeet heard his mother humming in the kitchen. In Moscow, the child, surrounded by geometric snowflakes, remembered her father's terrible jokes and boundless faith in her goodness. They weren't alone. They had never been alone. The overseer recoiled as if struck. "This is not possible. Human attachment creates weakness, not strength." "That's where you're wrong," Luna said, standing as the chamber stabilized around them. The walls stopped dissolving, the reality storm calmed. "Love doesn't make us weak. It makes it impossible to predict, and you can't control what you can't predict." Dr. Chen's eyes blazed back to full silver, as her artistic vision reasserted itself. Marcus sat up with recognition flooding his face. The other adults moved with renewed purpose instead of puppet string compliance. But more than that, Luna could feel the hybrid children across the globe remembering who they were beneath their alien gifts. Not malfunctioning nodes in a cosmic network, but beloved daughters and sons and siblings and friends who happened to carry starlight in their DNA. The overseer's form flickered between states, its certainty cracking. The collective consciousness offers order, purpose, freedom from the chaos of individual existence. And we're saying no thank you, Luna said firmly. All of us, together. Through the fragment's transformed song, she felt the choice rippling across the earth. Not a single decision forced on everyone, but thousands of individual choices made with the full knowledge that they were supported and loved regardless of what they decided. Some hybrid children chose integration willingly, drawn to the promise of cosmic purpose, but most chose the beautiful, messy, unpredictable path of remaining human while carrying starlight. And for the first time in its vast existence, the collective consciousness found itself facing something it had never encountered. Successful rebellion based not on superior technology or greater power, but on the simple revolutionary act of choosing love over efficiency. "My grandmother," Luna said, turning to face the overseer directly. "Bring her back. She has been integrated. The process cannot be... Bring her back." Each word carried the weight of every human heart that had ever chosen to love something fragile and mortal and irreplaceable. The overseer's form began to collapse inward as the fragment song reached a crescendo of pure human defiance. When the light faded, an old woman with silver hair and fierce eyes stood blinking in the restored chamber, holding a rolling pin like a weapon. "Luna, sweetheart," Grandma Eleanor said calmly, "I think we need to have a very long talk about your grandfather's collection." Luna ran to her grandmother's arms, the fragment singing with joy against her ribs, and felt the future reshape itself around the simple truth that love, however chaotic and inefficient, would always find a way. The aftermath of cosmic rebellion, Luna discovered, involved a surprising amount of practical concerns. "First things first," Grandma Eleanor said, settling onto an overturned crate that had somehow materialized in the restored chamber. "Someone needs to explain to me how my storage unit became ground zero for an intergalactic custody battle." She still gripped the rolling pin, though her silver eyes now sparkled with the same warmth Luna remembered from childhood bedtime stories. Luna pressed closer to her grandmother's side, the fragment humming contentedly against her ribs. The terror of nearly losing Eleanor forever still echoed in her chest, but beneath it grew something stronger, a fierce determination that surprised her with its intensity. "The overseers aren't gone," Dr. Chen said quietly, her paint-stained fingers tracing equations in the air that Luna could almost read now. "They've retreated to reassess, but they'll be back. What we did here, it's unprecedented. They'll want to understand it before trying again." Marcus nodded, his consciousness fully restored but somehow deeper than before. The hybrid children around the world, they're all awake now, really awake. But that makes them visible too. Through the fragment's transformed song, Luna could feel them, dozens of young voices humming with newfound purpose. The girl in Tokyo was teaching her grandmother basic kanji symbols that glowed within a light. The boy in Sao Paulo had convinced his parakeet to carry messages to other hybrid children across the city. In Moscow, geometric snowflakes were spelling out words of encouragement in a dozen languages. "They're not hiding anymore," Luna realized. "None of us are." "Which brings us to the question of what comes next," Dr. Chen said. "Your grandfather spent 40 years building a resistance network in secret. But you've done something he never imagined. You've made hiding impossible." Luna stood, the fragment's weight familiar and comforting against her chest. Around the chamber she noticed details that hadn't been there before. Workstations emerging from the walls, crystalline displays showing hybrid children across the globe, communication arrays that hummed with the same warm frequency as her fragment. "The chamber's changing," she said wonderingly. "You're changing it," Grandma Eleanor observed. "Just like your grandfather changed those fragments with 40 years of love and stubbornness. The chamber's responding to what you need it to become." Luna walked to one of the new displays, watching a real-time map of hybrid awakening sites. Red dots marked locations where overseers had attempted integration. Blue dots showed successful resistance. The blue was spreading. "We need to organize them," Luna said, her 8-year-old voice carrying new authority. "The children who are waking up, they're scared and confused. They need to know they're not alone, and they need to know how to protect themselves." Marcus joined her at the display. "Your grandfather's network was built for hiding, but what you're talking about is something completely different. A network built for standing together." "The fragment changed because it was loved," Dr. Chen added, understanding dawning in her silver eyes. "But that transformation works both ways, doesn't it? Luna, you're not the same child who walked into that storage unit." Luna touched the metal through her shirt, feeling its warm pulse synchronize with her heartbeat. Dr. Chen was right. Something fundamental had shifted inside her during the confrontation with the overseer. The terrified little girl who'd hidden in redwood shadows was gone, replaced by someone who could look at cosmic-scale problems and see solutions. "We start with communication," Luna said, her mind working through possibilities with startling clarity. "Every hybrid child needs to know about the others. Then we teach them to strengthen their connections, not through alien technology but through human bonds, family, friendship, community. A resistance built on love instead of secrecy," Grandma Eleanor mused. "Your grandfather would be proud and probably terrified." Luna grinned, feeling the fragment pulse with approval. "We'll need safe houses, training protocols, ways to identify overseer infiltration, and backup plans for when they come back with a new strategy." "When did you become a strategic mastermind?" Marcus asked with amazement. "When I inherited more than just a storage unit," Luna replied. "I inherited responsibility for every hybrid child who's going to wake up scared and alone, and I'm not going to let them down the way I almost did today." The chamber continued transforming around them, responding to Luna's growing vision. Command centers crystallized from empty air. Communication arrays bloomed like flowers of light and metal. Training facilities emerged from the walls, designed for children who needed to learn control without losing their essential humanity. "This is going to be bigger than anything your grandfather imagined," Dr. Chen breathed. Luna nodded, watching hybrid children across the globe begin reaching out to each other through the fragment's transformed network. For the first time since finding that twisted piece of metal, she felt truly ready for whatever came next. "Then we'd better get started." Luna's vision of a transformed resistance lasted exactly 3 hours before reality crashed back down around them. The first sign of trouble came through the fragment's network, a desperate whisper from the boy in Sao Paulo whose parakeet had stopped glowing and fallen silent. Then the girl in Tokyo reported that her kanji symbols were flickering and dying. Within minutes, hybrid children across the globe were crying out in confusion as their newfound connections began severing one by one. "They're adapting," Dr. Chen said, her paint-stained fingers flying over the crystalline displays. "The overseers, they're not retreating to reassess. They're evolving their approach in real time." Luna pressed her hand against the fragment, feeling its song grow strained and distant. The warm human starlight that had blazed so brilliantly during their rebellion was being systematically dampened by something cold and methodical. "It's like they're wrapping each connection in cotton," Marcus reported, his silver eyes dim with effort. "I can barely sense the other hybrid adults anymore." Grandma Eleanor set down her rolling pin and moved to Luna's side, her weathered hand gentle on her granddaughter's shoulder. "Sweetheart, what exactly did you promise these children when you awakened them?" Luna's chest tightened as she remembered her fierce declarations of unity and protection. Through the weakening network, she could feel dozens of young minds reaching out desperately, their trust in her absolute, even as their abilities flickered toward darkness. "I told them they'd never be alone again," Luna whispered. I told them we'd teach them to be strong. And now they're more isolated than ever, Dr. Chen said gently. The overseers learned from our rebellion. Instead of trying to forcibly integrate everyone at once, they're creating individual containment fields. Each child is being slowly, carefully separated from the network while maintaining the illusion of connection. On the displays around them, Luna watched red warning indicators bloom across the map like a spreading infection. The blue dots of successful resistance were winking out one by one, replaced by amber markers that pulsed with ominous synchronization. They're not fighting us anymore, Marcus realized. They're starving us, cutting off each hybrid child's access to the network so gradually that most won't even realize it's happening until it's too late. Luna felt the fragments weight against her ribs like a stone of responsibility. Every amber light on the map represented a child who had trusted her, who had emerged from hiding because she'd promised them safety in numbers. Now they were more vulnerable than ever, awakened to their abilities but cut off from any support structure. Perfect targets for individual integration attempts. The chambers responding differently too, she noticed, watching as the beautiful training facilities began to fade at their edges. It's having trouble maintaining the transformations. Grandma Eleanor squeezed Luna's shoulder. Because it's powered by the network connections, isn't it? As the overseers isolate each hybrid, they're cutting off pieces of what makes this place work. The truth hit Luna like ice water. Her grand vision of a resistance built on love and connection was crumbling because love required communication. And the overseers had found a way to sever those communications without triggering the fierce protective response that had driven their earlier rebellion. We have to go to them, Luna said suddenly. If they can't reach us through the network, we reach them in person. Luna, there are dozens of hybrid children across the globe, Dr. Chen protested. We can't possibly... Not all of them, but we can start with the ones closest to total isolation. Luna moved to the displays, studying the amber warnings with new determination. Look, the girl in San Francisco, the boy in Portland, the twins in Sacramento. They're all within driving distance. If we can physically reconnect even a few of them to the network, maybe we can create a stronger foundation. Marcus shook his head. The moment we leave this chamber, we'll be completely exposed. The overseers will track our movements, anticipate our destinations. Then we split up, Luna said, her 8-year-old voice carrying frightening certainty. Cover more ground, harder to predict. Dr. Chen takes the southern route, Marcus goes north, Grandma Eleanor and I head to San Francisco. Absolutely not, Grandma Eleanor said firmly. I'm not letting you walk into that kind of danger. Luna turned to face her grandmother, and Eleanor stepped back at the intensity burning in those silver eyes. Grandma, I inherited more than just Grandpa's storage unit. I inherited his fight, and right now, there's a scared little girl in San Francisco who's probably sitting alone in her room, watching her abilities fade away, thinking she's going crazy because I promised her she wasn't alone. The fragment pulsed against Luna's ribs, its song weak but steady. Through the dying network connections, she could feel the weight of trust from dozens of hybrid children who believed in her absolutely. This is my choice to make, Luna said quietly. Not as someone's granddaughter or as a hybrid weapon, but as the person who started this. I'm going to finish it. The chamber hummed around them, its crystalline walls reflecting Luna's determination back in fractured rainbows. Outside, she knew, the overseers were tightening their methodical net. The final confrontation was coming whether she was ready or not. But for the first time since the rebellion began, Luna felt the cold clarity of absolute commitment settling into her bones. The moment they stepped outside the chamber, Luna felt the full weight of what they were walking into. The forest around them thrummed with an alien presence that made her teeth ache. Where once the redwoods had offered shelter and sanctuary, now every shadow seemed to pulse with watching eyes. The overseers had turned the entire landscape into a monitoring station, each tree and stone and breath of wind carrying information back to their collective consciousness. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Marcus muttered, his hand instinctively moving to shield his silver eyes from the piercing quality of the light. "This is a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Luna said, adjusting her grandfather's leather jacket around her small frame. The fragment pressed against her ribs like a coal of determination. "But that doesn't mean we don't walk into it." Grandma Eleanor hefted a backpack that clinked with mysterious contents, some combination of her grandmother's practical preparations and items she'd salvaged from the storage unit. "Your grandfather used to say that the difference between a hero and a fool was whether you brought the right tools to your own doom." Dr. Chen stood at the edge of the clearing, her paint-stained fingers tracing equations in the air that shimmered and dissolved before Luna could read them. "The mathematical probabilities are not encouraging. They know where we're going before we've decided ourselves." Through the fragment's weakening song, Luna could feel the hybrid children scattered across California like dying stars. The girl in San Francisco was down to whispers of ability, her connection to the network reduced to the faintest thread. The boy in Portland had gone completely dark an hour ago. Every minute they spent planning was another minute the overseers gained ground. "Then we stopped thinking like humans," Luna said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "They can predict human behavior because they've been studying us for 40 years. But what they can't predict is what happens when someone chooses to stop being entirely human." The adults turned to stare at her, and Luna felt that familiar shift, the moment when the frightened 8-year-old girl receded and something older and stranger took her place. The fragment pulsed in recognition, its alien harmonics weaving through her heartbeat. "The fragment changed because it was loved for 40 years, Luna continued, her voice carrying frequencies that made the redwood needles shiver. "But I've been changing too. Every vision, every connection, every time I've touched the network. I'm not the same person who walked into that storage unit." Grandma Eleanor stepped closer, her weathered face creased with concern. "Luna, sweetheart, you're scaring me a little." "I'm scaring myself," Luna admitted. "But those children are counting on us. And the only way to save them is to become something the overseers can't calculate or contain." She reached into her jacket and pulled out the fragment, holding it in her palm where its twisted metal surface caught the alien-touched light. For a moment its song filled the clearing, not the cold efficiency of its original purpose, not even the warm human starlight of their rebellion, but something entirely new, something that had never existed before in the universe's long history. "I can feel them," Luna whispered, her silver eyes reflecting depths that belonged to neither human nor alien consciousness. "Every hybrid child the overseers are isolating. I can feel their fear, their confusion, their trust in me, even as their abilities fade." The fragment began to levitate above her palm, spinning slowly as patterns of light rippled across its surface. Around the clearing, the redwoods leaned inward as if drawn by its impossible gravity. "And I can feel something else," Luna continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The overseers think they're containing us, isolating each connection. But what they're really doing is creating pressure, like trying to hold back an ocean with their fingers." Dr. Chen gasped as her mathematical intuition suddenly blazed to life. "Of course. They're not just cutting individual connections, they're compressing the entire network into smaller and smaller spaces. Eventually, that pressure has to release," Luna finished. "And when it does, every hybrid child they've been trying to isolate is going to reconnect at once. Not gradually, not controllably, but like a dam bursting." Marcus stepped forward, understanding dawning in his eyes. But that kind of sudden reconnection could overwhelm them completely. The shock of going from isolation back to full network consciousness, it could burn out their abilities permanently. Or it could awaken something in them that the overseers never anticipated, Luna said. Something they can't predict or control because it's never existed before. She closed her fingers around the fragment, feeling its alien metal warm to human touch. The hybrid children across California pulsed in her awareness like a constellation waiting to be born. The overseers pressed closer through the forest shadows, confident in their methodical strategy of isolation and control. But Luna Hartwell, no longer entirely 8 years old, no longer entirely human, no longer entirely afraid, smiled with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally understood the true nature of the test she'd been given. The final confrontation wasn't about choosing between human and alien. It was about becoming something unprecedented enough to save them all. The overseers emerged from the redwood shadows like living equations, their forms shifting between mathematical precision and something that hurt to look at directly. Luna felt them before she saw them, a pressure against her mind that tasted of cold starlight and absolute certainty. Luna Hartwell, the lead entity, spoke without vocal cords, its voice arriving directly inside her skull. "You have exceeded acceptable parameters." "Good," Luna replied, the fragment blazing against her palm. Around her, Marcus and Dr. Chen stepped protectively closer, while Grandma Eleanor's weathered hands found the hidden weight of her grandfather's pistol, useless against beings of pure thought, but comforting nonetheless. The overseers spread through the clearing in formation, their alien geometries casting shadows that bent light in impossible directions. Luna counted 7 distinct entities, though their edges blurred and merged where they touched. 40 years of careful manipulation and patient study radiated from them like heat. "You misunderstand your purpose," the lead overseer continued, its form solidifying into something almost humanoid, tall, silver-skinned, with eyes like black holes. "The hybrid program was designed to create bridges between species. You have chosen to become a weapon." "I've chosen to become myself," Luna said, feeling the fragment's song interweave with her heartbeat until she couldn't tell where the metal ended and she began. "Something you never planned for because you think in terms of control instead of love." The overseer tilted its head with mechanical precision. "Love is inefficient. Love is unpredictable. Love leads to chaos. Love leads to choice," Grandma Eleanor interrupted, surprising everyone, including the overseers, with the steel in her voice. "Something you've been trying to take away from these children for 40 years. Through the fragment's blazing network, Luna felt the moment arrive. Every hybrid child the overseers had been systematically isolating reached the critical pressure point simultaneously. In San Francisco, Portland, Sacramento, across the globe, dozens of young minds pressed against their containment fields with the desperate fury of the truly alone. "Now," Luna whispered. She opened her consciousness completely, dropping every barrier between herself and the fragment's alien song. The metal dissolved into pure light against her palm, its 40 years of accumulated love and stubbornness and human defiance flowing through her like molten starfire. The overseers recoiled as Luna's awareness exploded outward, not with the cold efficiency of their technology, but with something they had no framework to understand. The chaotic, brilliant, impossible warmth of a heart big enough to hold an entire species. Every containment field shattered at once. Across California, across the world, hybrid children gasped as their abilities blazed back to life stronger than ever. But instead of the careful, controlled awakening the overseers had planned, this was a supernova of connection, raw, wild, unprecedented. The girl in San Francisco found herself lifting her entire apartment building with pure joy. The twins in Sacramento reached out to each other across space and time and pulled themselves into the same moment. The boy in Portland opened his eyes and spoke in languages that wouldn't be invented for another 1,000 years. "Impossible," the lead overseer said, its perfect composure cracking. "The mathematical probabilities don't account for love," Luna finished, her 8-year-old body blazing with light that belonged to neither human nor alien consciousness. "You spent 40 years trying to predict us, but you never understood the one thing that makes us really dangerous." Around the clearing, the redwoods began to sing, their ancient voices joining the fragment's impossible harmony as Luna's transformation reached critical mass. She felt her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of flesh, beyond the limitations of any single species, becoming something that had never existed in the universe's long history. The other overseers pressed forward, their forms shifting into configurations designed for combat. But Marcus stepped into their path, his silver eyes blazing with his own hybrid fury, while Dr. Chen's equations suddenly solidified into barriers of crystallized mathematics that held them back. "You wanted bridges between species," Luna said, her voice now carrying harmonics that made reality shimmer. "Congratulations, you got one." She reached out through the global network, touching every hybrid child simultaneously, not to control them, not to direct them, but simply to remind them that they were not alone, that they had never been alone, that love was stronger than any containment field, and choice was more powerful than any alien manipulation. The response was instantaneous and devastating. Every hybrid on Earth awakened fully, not to their alien heritage or their human limitations, but to the unprecedented possibility of being both and neither. They rose from hiding places and safe houses and isolation chambers, their abilities no longer constrained by the careful parameters the overseers had spent decades establishing. The lead overseer staggered backward, its perfect form beginning to fracture. "What have you done?" Luna smiled with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally understood her grandfather's greatest lesson, that some things were worth becoming something new to protect. "I chose," she said simply, and watched 40 years of alien manipulation crumble before the impossible mathematics of love. The victory lasted exactly 13 seconds. Luna felt it the moment the network reached its breaking point. Not failure, but success so complete it threatened to consume everything she'd fought to protect. The hybrid children weren't just reconnecting, they were burning like stars going supernova, their abilities unleashed without any of the careful safeguards that had kept them stable. Through the blazing connection, she felt the girl in San Francisco screaming as her telekinesis spiraled beyond control, lifting cars and streetlights and entire storefronts into the air. The twins in Sacramento were aging and de-aging rapidly, their temporal abilities creating cascading loops that threatened to tear holes in reality itself. Across the globe, dozens of children were transforming into forces of nature too powerful for their 8-year-old minds to contain. "Luna?" Marcus gasped, his own abilities flickering wildly as feedback from the network sent shockwaves through his consciousness. "They're burning out, all of them." The lead overseer straightened, its fractured form solidifying with terrible understanding. "You see now, this is why control was necessary. Without constraints, hybrid consciousness becomes destructive to both species." Luna felt the fragment's song turning discordant in her chest, its 40 years of love and hope curdling into something that tasted of ash. She had given the hybrid children exactly what she'd promised, complete freedom from alien manipulation. But freedom without wisdom was just another kind of destruction. "There has to be another way," she whispered, watching Dr. Chen's equations collapse as the mathematical framework's underlying reality began to buckle under the pressure of unconstrained hybrid abilities. "There is," Grandma Eleanor said quietly, her weathered hand finding Luna's shoulder. "But you're not going to like it." Luna turned, seeing her own terrible understanding reflected in her grandmother's eyes. The fragment blazed against her ribs like a piece of the sun, its alien harmonics now perfectly synchronized with her heartbeat. She was the strongest connection point in the entire network, the anchor that held every other hybrid consciousness in alignment. If she severed that connection, the children would lose their abilities but survive. If she maintained it, they would all burn together in the beautiful, impossible fire of uncontrolled power. "No," Marcus said, reading her intentions in the shift of light around her small frame. "Luna, there has to be another option. Dr. Chen, your mathematics—" "The mathematics are clear," Dr. Chen said softly, tears streaming down her paint-stained cheeks. "The network requires a central processing node capable of handling the full load. Luna is the only hybrid with sufficient capacity, but maintaining that level of connection will—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Luna felt the truth burning through her consciousness like acid. To save the others, she would have to become something that was no longer human, no longer a little girl, no longer Luna Hartwell at all. she would become a living bridge between species, conscious, aware, but transformed beyond any possibility of return. Through the fragment's blazing song, she felt her grandfather's presence like an echo of starlight. He had made his own sacrifice 40 years ago, choosing to hide the truth rather than let it destroy the world. Now she faced the same impossible choice, but where he had chosen isolation, she would choose connection. "Will it hurt?" she asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I don't know, sweetheart," Grandma Eleanor admitted, her fingers tightening on Luna's shoulder. "But your grandfather used to say that the most important things we do are the ones that scare us most." Luna felt the hybrid children across the globe tearing themselves apart with uncontrolled power. Beautiful, brilliant, impossible beings who had trusted her promise that they were not alone. In San Francisco, the girl was weeping as her abilities lifted an entire city block. The twins were trapped in temporal loops that grew more chaotic with each iteration. None of them deserved to burn for her choices. The overseers watched with the cold satisfaction of vindicated science, their alien consciousness finally comprehending what they considered the inevitable result of uncontrolled evolution. But Luna saw something else in their perfect calculations: fear. Fear of what she might become if she chose transformation over destruction. "I love you, Grandma," Luna said, feeling the fragment begin to merge with her ribs, her heart, her entire nervous system. "Tell them I chose to be the bridge." Before anyone could stop her, Luna opened her consciousness completely to the network's blazing chaos, not to control it or direct it, but to become the living foundation that could support its impossible weight. She felt her 8-year-old body begin to change, not growing older, but growing deeper, expanding into dimensions that had no names in any human language. The last thing she heard before transformation claimed her was Grandma Eleanor's whispered promise: "We'll remember, sweetheart. We'll always remember the little girl who saved everyone." Then Luna Hartwell dissolved into light and love, and the singing mathematics of a bridge between worlds, holding 47 hybrid children safely in the palm of her infinite, impossible heart. The overseers staggered backward as something unprecedented blazed to life in the redwood clearing. Not human, not alien, but the first of something entirely new. The light faded slowly, like dawn in reverse. Where Luna had stood moments before, something impossible now existed, a pillar of crystallized starlight that pulsed with the rhythm of 47 synchronized heartbeats. It reached from the forest floor to the redwood canopy, its surface reflecting depths that belonged to no earthly geometry. Inside its translucent core, patterns of silver and gold danced like living equations, each one a hybrid child's consciousness held safe and stable. Grandma Eleanor fell to her knees, her weathered hands pressed against the crystal's warm surface. "Luna, sweetheart, can you hear me?" The answer came not as words, but as a sensation, love so pure it made the air itself shimmer. The crystal pulsed once, and Eleanor felt 8 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and fierce hugs compressed into a single moment of recognition. Marcus staggered forward, his silver eyes wide with wonder and grief. Through his own hybrid consciousness, he could feel Luna's presence like a vast ocean, still her but transformed beyond any framework he understood. She was the network now, her essence spread across 47 connections, holding each child's power in perfect balance. "The cascade stopped," Dr. Chen whispered, her tablet showing readings that defied every law of physics. "Across the globe, every hybrid signature has stabilized. Their abilities are intact but regulated somehow, as if someone's teaching them control from the inside." The lead overseer approached the crystal cautiously, its mathematical certainty shattered. For 40 years they had operated under the assumption that hybrid consciousness required external management. This transformation, this willing dissolution into something greater than the sum of its parts, fell outside every parameter they had established. "Impossible," it said, though its voice carried notes of what might have been wonder. "Individual consciousness cannot sustain network integration at this scale. The mathematical requirements..." The crystal flared, and Luna's voice emerged from its depths. Not the frightened 8-year-old who had found a mysterious fragment, but something older and infinitely patient. "Mathematics isn't everything," she said, her words carrying harmonics that made the redwood sway. "Sometimes you need love to solve the equation." Through the global network, the hybrid children felt the change immediately. The girl in San Francisco gasped as her telekinesis suddenly came under perfect control, her abilities guided by an invisible hand that felt like sunshine and bedtime stories. The twins in Sacramento found their temporal loops smoothing into ordered spirals, time itself bending around them with gentle precision. Across 6 continents, dozens of children discovered that their powers no longer fought against their humanity. Instead, they danced together in harmony. But the cost was devastating in its completeness. "She's gone," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "The Luna we knew, she's still here, but she's distributed, spread so thin across the network that she can never come back." Grandma Eleanor pressed her forehead against the crystal, feeling the echo of her granddaughter's presence like warmth through glass. This wasn't death. It was transformation into something that had never existed before. Luna had become the bridge she'd promised to be, but bridges existed to be crossed, not to live their own lives. "She knew," Eleanor whispered. "When she made the choice, she knew what it would cost." The other overseers materialized around their leader, their forms flickering between confusion and something approaching reverence. In 40 years of careful manipulation, they had never witnessed voluntary transcendence. Their entire understanding of hybrid development was based on the assumption that individuals would always choose self-preservation over collective sacrifice. "What do we do now?" the lead overseer asked, not to its companions but to the crystal itself. Luna's response rippled through the clearing like music made visible. "You learn. The children aren't your experiment anymore. They're my responsibility, but you're welcome to study how love changes the equations you thought were fixed." Around the world, the hybrid children began to understand their new reality. They were still connected to each other, still part of something larger than themselves, but now that connection felt safe instead of overwhelming. Luna's presence touched each of them like a gentle hand, teaching them control through example rather than constraint. Dr. Chen's tablet chimed with incoming data, stability readings from hybrid children across the globe, all showing the same impossible result: perfect integration of human consciousness with alien abilities, regulated by something that measured love in mathematical units. "The storage unit," Grandma Eleanor said suddenly, looking up at the crystal with tears streaming down her cheeks. She found more than just a piece of metal in there. She found her purpose. The crystal pulsed once in acknowledgement, and for just a moment, everyone in the clearing felt what Luna felt: the joy of 47 children learning to fly without fear, the satisfaction of equations finally balanced by something more than logic, the quiet contentment of a bridge that had found its purpose. Luna Hartwell was gone, but what she had become would stand in this redwood clearing forever, a testament to the transformative power of choosing love over fear, connection over safety, and hope over the cold mathematics of control. The first day of a new world had begun. 6 months later, Grandma Eleanor made her way down the familiar forest path, her weekly bouquet of wildflowers bright against the gathering dusk. The redwood clearing had changed since that impossible day, not physically, but in ways that made the very air seem to hum with possibility. The crystal still stood at the heart of the grove, its translucent surface reflecting depths that shifted with Luna's moods. Today it pulsed with warm gold, which Eleanor had learned meant the hybrid children were having a particularly good day somewhere in the world. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, settling onto the wooden bench that Marcus had built beside the crystal. "I brought you daisies. Remember how you used to pick them behind the house?" The crystal's response came as it always did, not words, but a sensation of recognition so profound it made Eleanor's chest tight with love and loss. Luna was still there, still her granddaughter, but transformed into something that existed in 47 places simultaneously. Dr. Chen published her paper, Eleanor continued, arranging the flowers at the crystal's base, the one about love as a quantifiable force. She's getting marriage proposals from mathematicians across 3 continents. A pulse of gentle laughter rippled through the crystal, and for a moment, Eleanor could almost see Luna's gap-toothed grin reflected in its depths. Footsteps on the forest path announced Marcus's arrival. He came every week, too, drawn by the same need to maintain connection with the girl who had changed his understanding of what it meant to be caught between worlds. His silver eyes had grown brighter in recent months, his own abilities stabilizing under Luna's distant guidance. "How are our kids today?" he asked, settling beside Eleanor on the bench. The crystal flared, and both adults felt the familiar sensation of borrowed perspective, Luna's consciousness touching each hybrid child across the globe in turn. Sarah in San Francisco had learned to build sculpture gardens with her telekinesis, creating art that defied gravity and convention. The Sacramento twins were working with theoretical physicists, their temporal abilities opening new frontiers in understanding causality. Dozens of other children were discovering that their powers, properly guided, could heal rather than harm. "She's teaching them," Marcus marveled. "Every single day, she's showing them how to be human and something more." The overseers visited the clearing monthly now, their rigid certainty replaced by something approaching humility. They had spent millennia believing that evolution required control, that hybrid consciousness needed external management. Luna's transformation had proven them catastrophically wrong and given them their first glimpse of what willing cooperation between species could accomplish. "The new arrivals are adapting faster," Eleanor said, referring to the hybrid children who had been born since Luna's transformation. "She's there for them from the beginning now, helping them understand what they are before fear can take root." Through the crystal's gentle hum, they felt Luna's satisfaction at this particular development. The storage unit in Mendocino had been converted into a research center, Dr. Chen's equations covering every wall as she worked to understand the mathematical principles underlying love-based consciousness integration. But Luna's real laboratory was the global network of children who no longer had to choose between their human hearts and their alien gifts. A new presence approached through the trees. Dr. Chen herself, tablet in hand and paint stains on her lab coat despite her best efforts. "Remarkable," she announced without preamble. "The Helsinki twins just solved a paradox that's been plaguing quantum physicists for decades. And the boy in Tokyo is growing plants that shouldn't be able to survive in Earth's atmosphere. Luna's not just stabilizing them, she's helping them transcend the limitations we thought were absolute." The crystal pulsed with what could only be described as pride, and Eleanor felt her heart swell with the same emotion. Her granddaughter had become something unprecedented, a consciousness that existed to nurture rather than control, to guide rather than constrain. "Any word from the children themselves?" Marcus asked. Dr. Chen consulted her tablet, scrolling through messages that arrived daily from around the world. Sarah, in San Francisco, sent a drawing. She says Luna visits her dreams and teaches her new ways to shape light. The twins write equations now that describe emotional states as mathematical functions. They all know she's watching over them. As twilight deepened around the redwood grove, the crystal's internal light grew brighter, patterns of silver and gold dancing like aurora beneath its surface. Through the network, Luna touched each of her 47 charges goodnight, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing for the being she had become. Eleanor stood slowly, her arthritic knees protesting after an hour on the wooden bench. "Sweet dreams, Luna," she whispered, pressing her palm against the crystal's warm surface one last time. The response came as pure emotion, love infinite and patient, stretched across continents but somehow still concentrated in this single moment of connection. Luna Hartwell had returned from her transformation, not as the 8-year-old girl who had discovered her grandfather's secret, but as something far greater, a bridge between worlds that chose to carry others rather than simply connecting them. In storage units and research centers, in the dreams of hybrid children and the equations of amazed scientists, her legacy grew daily. She had found her way home, by becoming home for 47 others. As Eleanor's footsteps faded into the forest darkness, the crystal settled into its evening rhythm, a gentle pulse that matched the sleeping heartbeats of children scattered across 6 continents. Inside its crystalline depths, Luna Hartwell existed as both memory and promise, holding vigil over a world that had learned to embrace the impossible. 3 years had passed since that transformative day in the redwood clearing. The morning brought familiar visitors to Luna's grove. A young couple from Portland stood hesitantly at the clearing's edge, their 4-year-old daughter clutching a stuffed rabbit while silver light danced around her small fingers. The child's abilities had manifested early, too early for comfort, and desperate parents had heard whispers of a place where hybrid children could find peace. "Is she really in there?" the mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The crystal flared gently, and Luna's consciousness reached out to touch the frightened child's mind. "You're not alone," came the wordless message, wrapped in warmth that smelled of bedtime stories and chocolate chip cookies. "You're perfect exactly as you are." The little girl stepped forward, her fear melting into wonder as patterns of light began dancing just for her within the crystal's core. This was Luna's true work now, not just stabilizing the children she already guided, but welcoming each new hybrid consciousness with the unconditional acceptance she had always craved herself. By afternoon, the clearing had become a pilgrimage site. Families arrived daily, drawn by reports of miraculous healing and impossible mathematics. Scientists came to study what Dr. Chen had termed consciousness-based reality manipulation. The overseers materialized with increasing frequency, their rigid worldview evolving to accommodate the truth Luna had forced them to confront. Love, not control, was the catalyst for transcendence. Marcus arrived as he did every Tuesday, carrying his worn copy of Alice in Wonderland, the book Luna had been reading the night before her transformation. He settled on his familiar bench and began to read aloud, his voice carrying through the grove like a prayer. "Who in the world am I? Ah, that's the great puzzle," he read, the words taking on new meaning in this place where identity had become beautifully fluid. The crystal hummed its appreciation, and through the global network, 47 hybrid children paused in their daily activities to listen. Sarah in San Francisco set down her light sculptures to hear the familiar story. The Sacramento twins, now teenagers working at the cutting edge of temporal physics, smiled as Luna's love carried Marcus's voice across impossible distances. Evening brought Grandma Eleanor, as it had every day for 3 years. She moved more slowly now, leaning heavily on the walking stick Marcus had carved from fallen redwood, but her weekly visits remained sacred ritual. "The adoption agency called today," she said, settling beside the crystal with a contented sigh. "Another hybrid family wants to move to Mendocino. That makes 37 families in town now. We're becoming quite the little community." Indeed, the coastal town had transformed as surely as Luna had. Families with hybrid children flocked to the area, drawn by proximity to the crystal and the promise of belonging. The old storage facility had expanded into a full research campus where Dr. Chen worked alongside scientists from around the world, mapping the mathematics of love-based consciousness integration. But the true measure of Luna's impact wasn't found in published papers or relocated families. It lived in the daily miracles her guidance made possible. Hybrid children who grew up confident in their dual nature, who used their abilities to heal rather than harm, who understood that being different meant being blessed rather than cursed. As darkness settled over the grove, the crystal's internal aurora began its nightly display. Patterns of silver and gold swirled through crystalline depths, each one representing a hybrid child somewhere in the world, learning to balance human heart with alien gift. Luna touched each mind gently, whispering the bedtime blessing that had become her signature: "You are loved, you are whole, you are home." The network had grown beyond her original 47 children. New hybrids were born monthly now, their consciousness seamlessly integrated into Luna's expanding web of guidance and protection. Each one found their place not through struggle or fear, but through the patient love of a girl who had chosen transcendence over safety. Dr. Chen often wondered what Luna's grandfather would think of this outcome. His storage unit had contained the catalyst for humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial consciousness, but it had taken his granddaughter's extraordinary heart to transform that contact into communion. In the crystal's gentle glow, past and future converged. The frightened 8-year-old who had discovered a mysterious metal fragment had become an eternal guardian, proving that the most profound transformations began not with advanced technology or alien intervention, but with a choice to love without limits. Luna Hartwell had found her way home by becoming home for hundreds of others, a bridge between worlds that would stand in this redwood clearing forever, singing the mathematics of love to any consciousness brave enough to listen. The new beginning stretched endlessly forward, bright with infinite possibility.